Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Cyber Talk with Bob and Chris. I wanted to reach out this week, and Chris and I were talking about some of the myths that are out there of moving to the cloud, and it seems like everyone thinks that they jump on Microsoft, they jump into Google, and their data's there all the time, and they just take care of it for us, and they do it all for a simple $5 a month. Contract in some cases. So Chris, what's going on this week?
It's a fun, exciting week. I won't talk about licensing because that's another sticking point with Microsoft. But yeah, the thing that we get a lot with our customers are, well, if we put it in the cloud, it should just be covered, right? Like they're backing up all our data. They're making sure that it's secure. They're making sure our identities are secure and things like that. That's their responsibility. It's not ours. But the truth is, there's a shared responsibility in everything that we do, including even just doing IT. There's still a shared responsibility between what you're doing in your company and like what we're providing, or if we're providing cybersecurity services, there's still a shared responsibility with you that you're still required to do certain things, like letting us know when you let go of an employee, something simple like that. And that extends into the cloud. That extends into Microsoft, Google, Amazon. Pick your service. Even QuickBooks are into it. For that. So we got slides, right? So let's just jump into
There's a couple slides here. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the shared responsibility piece really is, it's a responsibility of you, the business, or your and your IT person and Microsoft to really get stuff done.
Yeah. I think it's important to start at the bottom of the stack. So we look at the physical data center, the networks and stuff like that, stuff that you never see when you buy a service. When you buy software as a service, you're buying access to an application that has data in it. That's what you're buying. So if you go from the bottom and you go all the way up, that means Microsoft's required to actually have the data center, have all the equipment in there, make sure all the networking is working, the internet's are connected, the internet's connected. Also, if there's a failure of a data center, that it fails over to another data center so that they keep your access to your data and the application they're providing to you up and running. So that's where you see Microsoft in the first column going up the stack under software as a service or SaaS. But then you get up to identity and directory infrastructure, and it's split.
Well, actually, hold on there, Chris. Yeah. Let's stay on a data center for a minute, because some people think, well, I go to the cloud, it's going to be, in some cases, if I go to the cloud, the myth is it's going to be cheaper. Well, is it really cheaper? Because it is probably going to be more expensive than running that server in your office if you're doing it right. A lot of people will go put a server in, put it in a corner and run it and leave it running forever, not backing it up properly, not have the appropriate failover. So, when we do move somebody to the cloud, it really can cost them more money because they're getting better redundancy. They're getting, it's no longer, redundancy is no longer classified as just we have a RAID set.
Well, that too, that depends what you're saying, because like if you're doing the same level, like you said, on premise, it would be way more expensive. So like, how many people have 2 internet connections at their office?
Not many.
Right. Microsoft has, I think, up to 12 in a data center.
Okay.
So just like if one goes down, they use fancy routing, and it's called BGP, but they use routing, and they can like if one internet provider goes down, guess what? Another one picks up. So you have to take that into consideration. They have physical security. So how many people that have a server on site are actually locking it and protecting it with like biometrics and a security guard? That's not free. So as we go into these as a service, and we look at the shared responsibility model, to Bob's point, yeah, it could be more expensive, but at scale, software as a service is almost always going to be less expensive than hosting it internally.
If you do it right.
Yeah, if you do it right, because there's a lot of stuff we have to do. Backup, security, make sure that there's power. I mean, how many people have redundant power in their offices? We have some customers that they want to have stuff on site still, but they don't have a generator. Well, guess what? If you lose power because of a storm for 2 days, you don't have a server for 2 days. That doesn't happen when you host it in Microsoft's cloud, Google's cloud, Amazon's cloud. They're always going to have power. Now, they could have other issues, but they're always going to have power. They're going to have internet. So
until they run out of generator juice. Anyway, you mentioned backup. There's backup of servers. There's the physical redundant machines that's used for failover, and then there's also the data backup. The data backup really is the end user's problem when we look at the terms of service from these guys.
Yeah, and there's resiliency built into it. So there's, like I said, multiple locations to worry about. That's all Microsoft's responsibility with software. That's Google's responsibility, Amazon's responsibility. There's no responsibility for us as the purchaser of those services to make sure that there's redundancy built in, there's resiliency built in. So if they have a storm or if they lose power, like, that's their responsibility. When we get to the identity and the data, that's when everything changes. They provide you, the reason that's split, like on software as a service and even platform as a service, which is what PaaS stands for, the reason it's split is because they're giving you access to the directory infrastructure so that you can have your email address, you can have your users in there. But it's your responsibility to protect that. It's your responsibility to have good passwords, to turn on MFA. They give you MFA, but it's your responsibility to make sure that that's enabled. And I think that's a distinction that a lot of people don't understand or don't get. In specifically for like Microsoft, if you have a data loss, right? It's your responsibility. It's clear, that's clearly spelled out in that line. And this is on their shared responsibility matrix. This is right below it. So
and you know, it really is up to the end user company, the tenant or the IT person, to actually configure the security aspects appropriately. You know, the conditional access. You know, if you don't have people out of the country, we're going to configure your platform so that it doesn't accept connections out of the country, or at least monitor them.
Yeah, I mean, you could even do more geo restrictions if you really want to, but like at the end of the day, they're giving you a platform to work in. They're giving you software to work in. It's still your responsibility, or to find somebody to help you with your responsibility on this matrix. So any information and data, it's your responsibility. Devices, right. The devices that access it are your responsibility. The accounts and identities themselves are your responsibility. So you have to understand that if you're not doing things right and there's a breach, there's no responsibility for Microsoft to really do anything. If you have all of your email deleted and there's no recoverability of it, it's not their responsibility. They'll try to help you. They do have some level of backup, but it's not really that great. And it's not like a point in time, like long-term backup. They'll try to help you with it. But there are going to be situations where, let's say somebody makes a mistake and removes a license from somebody's account. Well, after 30 days, that data is deleted.
Right.
There's no getting it back. So unless you have a backup and disaster recovery piece built into this to say you're backing that data up, it's gone. So as business owners, we have to look at the risk, and we have to look at, okay, if we're using SharePoint and we're using OneDrive and we're storing all of our files, or we're using Google Drive for all our files, or Dropbox or anything like that, those all are going to fall under us to make sure that we're backing that data up. And then how long do you need to keep the data? That's something you have to determine inside your business. So
you need to figure out how long you're going to keep the data. And then you also got to figure out, you know, what is the real policy for how long we should be keeping these backups afterwards, because some people say we're going to keep it forever, but they don't want to pay. They don't have a budget, that type of budget,
right.
Or they don't even, or from a risk tolerance, having that much data floating around, should something happen, every single document in those data sets now become discoverable documents that need to be reviewed.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't touch on legal discovery. That opens up Pandora's box of
yeah.
Don't keep email forever. Write a policy and make sure that you're only keeping email for that long. Let's just say that's a good policy.
We can do another talk specifically around some of the stuff that we can do around legal retention. But
we're not lawyers. We don't play lawyers on TV either. We should probably preface that.
Yeah, right.
But make sure that we recover data, and a lot of it comes down to how are your end users? Like, I've worked with different types of companies. Like, I'll tell you this: some companies, their users are really good. They don't accidentally delete things. They don't accidentally move things. They're good. And then others are just like, every other day is an accidentally deleted file, or it wasn't deleted, it was moved. Things like that. So
all the time.
You have to understand the people that work for you, and then you have to have the policies in place to make sure that you understand, like, hey, this is how my users are. So if they delete a file 6 months ago and you don't have backup that covers 6 months, the file's gone.
Yeah.
Now, if you have some backup that goes back a year of retention or something like that, at least you can go back and get it. You might have to find it. It might take a little bit to find it because if somebody can't tell you like the timeline it was there, you may not be able to find it, but like quickly, but you'll be able to find it. So that's something to understand is that we just have to make sure that we understand that as the purchaser of a service, we're still responsible for the data and the information.
So, Chris, what are some of the risks around, on the responsibility matrix here? We've got devices listed as
Yeah.
responsibility of the customer, and I'm working with a couple new clients right now that all their people are working at home. They're working from their home PCs. We've got some security tools to deploy, and they're like, "Well, I don't want you looking at what I've got." And I've advised the clients; these clients are actually going to go and purchase home computers for these people, so that we have an appropriate environment. What is the real risk for people using these BYO devices everywhere?
Well, I mean, just data loss, right? If you don't configure this right, if somebody let's use a real world example. You hire a new employee, and this is a struggle with a lot of businesses, and we've seen customers deal with this. They hire a new employee, they let them use their home laptop or home desktop, whatever, to access the data. What happens if that person quits the next day? And you don't have the proper controls in place to make sure that you can delete that data and get it back. What happens? It's gone. That person has that data. You
Yeah.
can if you want to go through legal recourse, you could. You want to make sure that you have it in your employment agreement with people that they actually delete data when they're no longer there. But we've dealt with this, and it's still a struggle with some people. There are tools that we can use to control data, like what can access it. We can go back in and make sure that we can kind of wipe the data out. But you got to set
That's
that up before you even get this. You guys have this set up early.
But it also comes down to It also comes down to having that company policy in place to say,
Oh,
here's
100%.
what can we need to do, because people are like
Yeah.
shooting from the hip as to what to do today, or how we're going to secure the environment,
Yeah.
and then people are like, well, now I got my cell phone too, I got data there, but you've got solutions around that also.
Yeah, I mean, if it runs in a browser, you can feel a little safer, but still, you letting people use home computers, so you're not controlling what extensions they put in their browser. There are a bunch of Chrome extensions that people have downloaded and used that are stealing data. You don't control that. So even if it is cloud protected and you're not actually letting people download files, you have to still understand that if their browser is compromised, they can still see a lot of that data. So what you can't control is whatever the end user is doing, and then whatever else is on their network. Maybe something else is on their computer, maybe on their network. So again, but the point is, this is the responsibility of the company to manage. This is the risk. This is one of the risks you have to manage inside of your business. Is like, okay, if I want to allow people to use home devices or bring your own device or personal devices, what's the risk to the company data? What's the risk to our company that we're allowing that? And then that's something you have to either accept or you have to mitigate in some sense, like maybe like what Bob's doing with buying new computers for people, that they're going to do all their business from these computers, and then that way we can put the right controls in place.
So there are some great advantages to going to the cloud. We've
Yeah,
talked a little bit about the shared risk that everyone has a responsibility, but in the end, when you're moving to the cloud, you are getting much more security than you get in your office. This is a graph from that same report we were referencing earlier, where on the left-hand side is what typically would happen in a office environment. If someone was to deploy something locally, all the boxes aren't checked. And they're not checked because the people don't care. They might not have the resources, they might not have the staff, and they might not have the money to build out the environment appropriately to give you the resiliency that your business needs. When we move to the cloud, a lot of the boxes get checked, some by us, some by Microsoft, and even some by the end users for things that they need to be doing, because at the end of the day, it is your end users that are going to give your data away. So
yeah, it's like
um,
it's like 95% of cybersecurity incidents are caused by some user action. So,
Right.
so all the controls in the world sometimes can't stop users. I think the biggest key here is the responsibility for the resiliency of the network and of your access is transferred to the provider. And again, we go back to they have multiple internet providers, power, better physical security, all that stuff. That's all no longer your responsibility. But you still have to understand that you still have some responsibility in the game and some skin in the game for that. So I guess some recommendations we could talk about real quick is you definitely want to be backing up your data inside of Microsoft, inside of Google, inside Dropbox. You want to have it stored someplace else, not just on those platforms. One, it could be just because what happens if the platform comes unavailable. Now, obviously, in Dropbox, Microsoft, and Google's, it's probably not going to disappear tomorrow. Kind of big for that. But if you're using something else, something else to think about. Some software as a service companies don't offer you to be able to back up your data, and that's when you have to question what their policies are, because if they're not letting you back it up, then the responsibility for that backup has to be on them. So you want to make sure you read your end user license agreements. I think that's a big key here is make sure you're reading that stuff before when you're purchasing a service, make sure you understand what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the systems both of us used to use, we could export the contact system, but we couldn't export the workflows. So that made life interesting. So if so you've got your cloud security, you got your people, your shared responsibility. What would be the next step that somebody do to really know what's going on in their environment?
I think honestly, just get an assessment. If you don't know how to look at like what's happening, talk to a third party. It could be one of us. It doesn't have to be us, but talk to a third party. Have them come in there and look at your configuration settings. We can, we have a checklist we go through when we start looking at configurations. We have some automated tools we can use too that can kind of look at that. And then make sure that we look at like stuff like, I don't know, like OneDrive and SharePoint. A good example. There's retention periods for that, email retention periods. That's quicker recovery, but again, you still need backup. So we could go in there and look at it and see what the backup would be as well.
I think that's going to be a wrap for this week. And down the bottom in where this video is posted, I'll drop a link to the quiz that we have to really do a self-assessment of what you got. It takes about 2 minutes. Fill out some questions to get an answer back, and then you absolutely know if your data is safe or there's things that you need to be looking at.
Give some feedback too, like on any questions you have, but like any topics you want us to cover. We're open book. We want to make sure that we're giving people the content they want, and we're helping people out. That's our goal. I know in our business, our mission is to help 1 million people by 2026, and something that's important to me. So the reason that we're doing this is to help people, and
absolutely,
make sure that we kind of meet that mission.
I don't know if you saw it over the weekend. I did another live video while I was walking the dog through the park, and several people, it's got like 250 views of that video of me walking through the park. But it did, I was really talking about how the bad guys want to get to everybody. We get on these rants of people saying, oh, well, I don't have anything to protect. Well, you got a paycheck, and that message that you shared last week around the business that got compromised. I did that walk through the park, and it got people's attention. So like I said, we're here to really talk about anything, and that's going to be a wrap for this week. And if you got something you want to know, pop it in the chat, and we'll hop on a call.
Yeah, we look forward to next week as well. So let us know.